Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by the Global and International Engagement Unit and Career Connections in the School of Education at Indiana University. My name is Suliani Jati, and I will be your moderator today. This session, Preparing for Global Careers, aims to help students better understand the competencies that are critical for global career readiness and to introduce tools and resources that support international career planning. We are fortunate to have an excellent group of speakers with us today. Dr. Dawn Whitehead, she is the Vice President of the Office of Global Citizenship for Campus, Community, and Careers at the Association of American Colleges and Universities. She is also a distinguished alum of the IU School of Education. Welcome, Dr. Whitehead. We also have Shawn Wilson today. He is the Assistant Director of Career Readiness and Wellness in Career Connections at the School of Education. He will begin with an overview of career competencies and related resources today. Finally, we have Rockey. She is the career consultant in the School of Public Health. She will introduce important tools to support international career development. After the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session, so please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A section. It's a button under your Zoom window. You'll find that. I will moderate and all our speakers will join the discussion to answer your questions. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded and the recording will be posted on the GIE YouTube channel, so you can revisit the material or share it with your friends and colleagues. Without further ado, let's begin by welcoming our first speaker, Shawn. We can't hear you, Shawn. Still need to, can you try reconnect a little bit?
Can you hear me now?
Just a little bit.
Let me know if you can hear me now.
Okay, yes, we're good.
Thank you, and I apologize. Technical difficulties. My Zoom has been acting weird for the last month now. But as Leah said, I work at the Career Connections office at the School of Education. And I'm going to share today some of the competencies for professional career, not only as an employee in general, but also an international educator employee. So to share, without further ado, I begin with a pretty common screenshot here of the NACE competencies. These are 8 competencies from the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And I'll go over these briefly. Professionalism and work ethic is our first one. This is one that talks about everything from having a good work ethic, showing up on time, whether that's a 9-to-5 job or being on the job as needed, as any educator can tell you. All right. Communication is important, and that includes online as well as written communication. Both of those are very equally important. Critical thinking and problem solving. Are you able to weigh both sides of an idea and come up with a logical idea that is unique to your own perspective and is also informed by data and research often? Teamwork and collaboration is an important one in that, are you able to work with others that are like you or others that are very different than you are? All of those things factor in as being teamwork. Digital technology, a lot of you out there as Gen Z, as many of you are as students, are very technically savvy, a lot so more than me probably. But digital technologies are very critical in understanding the communication modes that happen. Are you able to work in an online environment? Do you have information literacy? Do you understand legitimate information in an online environment? Can you use everything from handheld devices such as smartphones, which obviously many of you, I would say 99.99999% of us are pretty savvy at that. Leadership, One of those soft skills, are you able to assume kind of control or management of a situation? Maybe not necessarily actually leading an effort per se, but being someone who's a game changer and a decision maker and can put your influence in the room. And then here's the one most today that we talk about, which I'm going to segue here shortly, global and intercultural frequent or fluency. Are you able to understand cultures from around the world? Are you able to understand different languages? Do you understand the cultural nuance in a country that you're going to be visiting or choosing to work or collaborate with as a coworker? That's critical when it comes to international education careers. And then lastly, career management. Are you always growing as an individual? Do you know how to market yourself and your values to get the dream job that you want? And can you stay current in the job that you want as well, which is critical in understanding your professional development? If we segue over to the National Association for International Educators, what you'll see here that I've blown up, you don't have to buy anything, I got these for free right here, is you see the different core competencies that are here. Business acumen is very important. A lot of types of things from finance to currency, how those exchange, how do you actually have business etiquette within a particular country, what's acceptable, what's considered rude behavior, what's considered behaviors that could cost you a job or a client or a relationship with a student or a family. Communications, very critical here. If you're able to not only fluently communicate, but also understand nonverbal communication within an international context. Do you understand the type of eye contact, the hand shaking, the hand gestures, the posturing, the positioning, spatial layout of an employee, the hierarchy within an international business or educational environment? All of those things are going to be very different depending on the country or the region in which you're going to be working. Compliance management. This has to deal with a lot of different things from bureaucracy and red tape, immigration, visa management. I'm not an expert in that, but I can tell you that that is very critical. Data collection and analysis. Can you collect data and analyze it within the context of an international environment? Do you understand the different types of figures and statistics within a host country that you'll be working with or working within? Inclusion and equity. Are you able to have that equal mindset in different cultures and have that frame of reference to attempt to understand the other person sitting across from you? Leadership is one that we hit again. It's very critical and it takes different flavors and forms within an international context. Do you know how to assume a leadership position within that international arena? People development. Do you know how to, as an educator within an international context, what I drill down on, making sure that students are able to develop under your tutelage? And program development and delivery. How does an international audience within an educational environment in particular understand and receive the information and the learning objectives that you're trying to put forth in a curriculum? Do you understand that context? Recruitment, enrolling, and advising kind of sums itself up in what it's saying there. But do you know how to attract, retain, as well as connect and engage a student population, a coworker population, a family population, or an official population of public officials within a country? Cultivating relationships, the interpersonal skills that are needed in an international context, and then touching briefly risk assessment, crisis management. Sometimes in different parts of the world, different crises may emerge that we aren't fully prepared for unless we have done our due diligence and understanding how to deal with those in a particular region. And then lastly, learning how to be a good teacher in an international context. Quickly here, I'll also point out resumes. And actually before that, I'll switch it over to Dr. Whitehead.
Thank you so much, Shawn, and thank you again for the team for inviting me to participate. One of the things, I'd like to share with my brief time is to think, one, about what a global context means. Secondly, look more closely at some of those global competencies that Shawn just shared. And then finally, talk about the application of those competencies as you seek global opportunities. So I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is having this conversation. I think back to when I was an undergraduate student, and I was an undergraduate student in the College of Arts and Sciences and the School of Education. And from the School of Ed perspective, there were two specific pathways or two options that they had for those of us that had an interest in doing work globally. One of those was to teach internationally or teach abroad. And the second opportunity was the Peace Corps. Now, of course, there are differences in those experiences, and there were other ways to do it, but those were the two opportunities where we saw pathways, and the university had folks that could support us as we were thinking about these things. And I think part of that stems to during that time period, the concept of international education was very much country specific. It was very much about mobility. It was very much focused on what are we doing to and with other countries from that perspective. We weren't really talking as much about the local, global, and international context as we are right now. And so, as a field, we've moved forward into having a mindset of more a global framing and not just an international framing. And when we have this global framing, we're able to look at things from the perspective of global challenges. And so we're thinking, oh, climate change is an issue that we face globally, or health inequities. That's something that we can face globally. Of course, this was largest when the COVID-19 pandemic happened, and we had to work together to develop the tools and things that we use to get our societies back in order and to deal with the impact of the COVID-19. But again, when you have this broader framing of global and not just international, it also broadens our perspective on what type of global careers we can go into, and it helps us see these opportunities much more differently, and it helps open up opportunities for some people that may have never thought that it was something for them. So you could think about working exclusively, for an international company or a company that's a French company, and you go to France and work there. But you could also think about working for an international company in the United States or in another part of the world. You could think about working exclusively for an American company that has vendors and activities in an international context. You could think about working remotely for an international company. So I think the point I want to make with this is there are many, many opportunities to engage in a global career, no matter where you are based. And so I think that's one thing just to think about it. But I think regardless of how you're situating it, the skills and competencies that Shawn just went through are really, really important. One of the things that I think is also exciting to think about is that while the NACE competencies are competencies that folks say are important for the workforce generally, they are particularly helpful for those of us that want to work in a global context. And they dovetail nicely with the NAFSA International Education Professional Competencies. So I'd like to highlight just a few that I have seen as particularly relevant for those that are working in this context. One thing that Shawn talked about, of course, is communication. And we know that communication is even more critical than ever when you are working in a global context. And NACE uses this term, communication, frame communication with respect to cultural differences and ask appropriate questions. So again, this comes from your experiences that you're already having working with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, where norms are different. How are you able to communicate and ask questions in a way that's respectful and helps you get to your goal? Do you communicate a little bit differently when you're working in a cross-cultural environment? How did you learn those skills of intercultural communication? Darla Deerdorf describes intercultural competence as acting effectively and appropriately across cultural differences. And so how is it that you develop that skill set, and how is it that you continue to hone those skills through your experiences that you're having? Again, as Shawn said, NAFSA also highlights the importance of communication. The other one that connects closely to communication, of course, is teamwork. NACE says teamwork is effectively managing conflict, interacting with and respecting diverse personalities. Those diverse personalities can be related to cultural or differences in that environment. So it's absolutely critical that you have these experiences, and you're already having many of these, and how you're able to translate them. The last skill I want to share is global and intercultural fluency. And again, one of the things that NACE talks about is soliciting and using feedback from multiple cultural perspectives. So not just the way that you're getting feedback, but also that you are hearing from people from different places. You're drawing on diverse ways of knowing as a skill set that is very valuable as you're going into a global workforce. I want to give you one quick example of an experience of mine that was a failure. And I thought I had these skills and these competencies. This was about 20 years ago, and we were working closely with the university in Kenya. And one of our team of our colleagues, they had done a call every Friday morning with their teams. And so every Friday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, to adjust for the time difference, they had their call. Well, we decided that email would be a good way to do this. Instead of setting up a call, we thought, oh, that's easier. We don't have to worry about the time differences. And so we had kept putting forward things. And then when deadlines came, nothing happened. And so when we traveled to Kenya, because that was part of our plan to meet and talk, we said, did you get our messages? We've been sending and it seemed like you responded again 20 years ago. And our colleagues, when we got there, said, oh, yes, but email is just gossip. Email isn't a formal way of communication. And so again, we learned the hard way. And so, of course, when we got back, we set up calls. Now, of course, we can work through email. It's much more, it's an official means of communication. But that's an example of a time when, if you don't know that what type of communication is effective and works in a different environment, it can lead to some less productive outcomes. So I think the big thing is the key is not just knowing the competencies. The key is having experience where you're able to demonstrate and practice the competencies. And then most importantly, it's when you're able to describe those experiences when you get into an environment where you are seeking employment and you're talking to people about a job. So, one of the things that we've heard in a lot of work that we've been doing with employers in our different conferences and in our research projects is a number of employers have told us right off the bat, when they see that someone has a global experience, their interest is piqued in many cases. And they say, oh, well, there's an assumption that you're going to come with a skill set that involves working with people from different backgrounds. There's an assumption that you'll be flexible, you know how to be fluid and work in these environments. But they need you to explain those experiences in the interview. So you may get an interview because you've had those global experiences, but they want you to be able to describe what happened. How did you learn? How did you apply these skills? And how do these competencies, and how do these competencies then relate to the position that you're seeking? So I wanted to share just two quick examples from some of my former students who have shared with me how they were able to articulate their experiences and parlay their words and experiences into a job in a global context. So one of my students, she actually this is a mobility-based model example. She had actually studied abroad multiple times in China and Morocco, also in Ghana with me. And so she was able to really demonstrate her skills of global and intercultural fluency, of communication, critical thinking. She was able to draw on her field experiences and say, oh, when I was working with this nonprofit organization, I was able to do all these things. And she eventually, these skills and these competencies were what a university in New England was looking for in an international student advisor. So again, she was able to parlay those skills. This again is a globally focused career based at a US institution. She ended up ultimately doing some placements internationally as part of her work. Secondly, I love to share this example. I had another student who talked about it's sort of like my failure that I shared. She talked about communication, technology, and relationship cultivation. So my former student had lived in International House when she was an undergraduate student, where her roommates were from China, Malaysia, and Mexico. So it was that environment. So she was very familiar with the Lunar New Year and Chinese New Year because her friends then would tell her, we're going home, we're going to be in our literal hometown for 2 weeks, and celebrating. So my student went on to create a cosmetics company, was based in Kenya, but the suppliers in the place that they got the supplies and that created the cosmetics were. And so she realized, she knew Lunar New Year was coming up. And so she had sent a request for something the day before Lunar New Year. And so when her suppliers did not respond until the holiday was over and they came back and she said, oh, now I get it. But she didn't get worked up. She said, I should have remembered and I should have known. So she was working in a very international context and she learned from that. So she said, every year I made sure since then that anything I needed was submitted well before. So again, she was able to draw on those experiences that she had as an undergraduate that were global in nature to then impact her work. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Shawn, and he's going to give us some more helpful information on working in global context.
Thanks, Dr. Whitehead. As far as the resume development you may be asking on an international resume, How is it different than a domestic or US resume that you would have here for a standard US job? And I found a pretty good website. I will chat the link in after we're done here about the difference between an international resume and a domestic resume. The one thing that you want to remember is when it comes to your experiences and how you lay out an international resume, the country is very important in that context. It can vary from country to country. Overall, the individual here that I'm citing, which we'll talk about at the bottom, had some tips, and there are big differences between a domestic and an international resume. The first one is your professional personality. How do you display the skills? How do you outline those to show your qualifications? Uh, the personality touch is going to be a lot more of a stake within the resume than just the standard look. And you have to kind of strategically lay that out. Some areas that are talked about is being upfront and stating clearly a career objective that you're wanting to ensure that they understand that. And then these three, especially, and also what Dr. Whitehead was also talking about, those work experiences and the skill sets that you bring to the foray are going to be very, very important. Some of those that are especially important is, have you worked within that cultural context? Are you fluent within particular languages? If you're working in Latin America, for instance, Spanish, Portuguese, any given European country, or in the Asian area of work experience. Some of the job descriptions and how you outline those, you have to be pretty particular because they want to know a lot about you, in particular if you're coming from what is called an outside context or being in an international context. Some other areas that are important here, the length of your resume. Uh, they're not going to like the what I call flowery look of a resume. They're going to go for more of the nuts and bolts of it. They want to see what you have to offer. And you may be saying, "Oh, Shawn, this is great. I have the link or not, but it would sure be great to see maybe an international resume created." So what I actually did was created a fictional resume according to these standards, so you kind of actually see what it would look like. As I tell anybody, even in a context of resume building, that there is no particular resume that is better than another one. Lots of different resumes can look differently. So there isn't like a law and gospel for a resume. But what I did here, a very bare bones resume template, would look like this. Notice the objective here clearly stated. Notice how they're also highlighting some of the language skills and cultural contacts that's going to be important. And then notice some of the competencies again that this employer within an international context. In this, we're looking at a Latin American bent towards wanting to work within that region. And then you can see the professional experiences, and this is backing up what Dr. Whitehead talked about. They want to see those actual work experiences and those professional competencies lived out, worked out, if you will. Notice here they're pointing out all the different types of cross-cultural competence that you have. And then lastly, kind of backing it up here, you can see they strategically put in also their cultural competencies on language fluency, which is almost non-negotiable in a way. You have to understand that. And very concise. There isn't a lot of flowery language here, and it's very nuts and bolts talking about what it is they bring to the table. And now you may be thinking, well, what kind of jobs are out there internationally and how can I find those? And for that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Nan, who has some phenomenal resources to share with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rockey. I am a career consultant with the School of Public Health, but I was really grateful to be asked to be on this panel today. I specifically work a lot with international students looking for work either in the US abroad, but there are other resources as well for students who are already on campus and looking for work internationally. I'm going to share my screen. Just give me one moment. I'm going to share with you probably the most critical one, particularly for international students on campus. This is Interstride. This is exclusively for international student use, but this comes with a mountain of information. I have come with, I made a fake profile a while ago so I can demonstrate this for students. But this includes jobs, it includes seminars on application tools and materials, webinar series, different types of visas that are available to work in the US and externally. And if you're looking at work that isn't in the US and you're wanting to look abroad at Canada, Singapore, Germany, you can search by specific country visa requirements, which can be really helpful for seeing different country requirements that are more complex or have different restriction or measures for individuals. It's really critical to make a profile here. This is definitely a tool that I think can be underutilized by students on campus in navigating international jobs as an international applicant. Another tool that I would really recommend is the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which is seen here on my webpage. The Occupational Outlook Handbook is put together by the U.S. Department of Labor, and this details the growth of different jobs within the United States and across the U.S. as a larger whole. So you can find career paths, what the requirements are, the average salary, what states are hiring the most right now, what states are paying the most right now. The salary in Texas is going to vary greatly from a salary starting in Kentucky. This can be really helpful for navigating moving interstate or seeing different state requirements for licensure jobs. I also, if you are looking for work within the United States, this is a Chrome extension called the H-1B Sponsor Checker. It's a installation for Chrome that will help you find jobs in the United States that already provide sponsorships. The United States does put a cap on how many H-1B visas they will allow to sponsor each year. So it's not an endless bottomless amount. This can help you weed out what countries are often being approved to provide a visa, as well as how to identify what companies are currently providing a visa for their position here in the US. But for those of you who are looking to study abroad on the larger scale, there is the Indeed Country Switcher, which is a Chrome extension again that allows you to install on your browser and see and search for jobs in other countries and see what might be a good fit for you in the long run across multiple countries and multiple nations and see what their requirements can look like. This can be really helpful for finding different work and across many, many countries, and you can really get real granular in particular in what you're looking for that might be a really good fit for you in your career path. And finally, again, this is for international students that can be really helpful. This is the Immigration Policy Map. This is maintained by a nonprofit research institute that does track where populations of immigrants tend to land in the United States. Why I'm showing you this is that you can search by country of origin and narrow down where you can find pockets of people who maybe come from a similar background as you. For example, I'm going to select Bangladesh and it will pull up the various populations that have settled and the number. This can be extremely helpful if you are looking for a job in the United States and you are trying to have an idea of where do people with my background tend to land, where do they tend to settle, where are they finding work. And you can use this as a comparative for the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which does list what states are hiring a lot right now. So if you pull up both those maps side by side, you can see, oh, there is a lot of work in Texas. There's a lot of work in California. We can see what counties, Los Angeles, Miami-Dade County, Florida. And there's also a really great education system based out of Florida that I can find work. This can help narrow it down a bit more for you to make this a more strategic approach instead of grasping for whatever we can find. It's a multiple pronged approach. You do need to utilize a dynamic, adaptable, multiple approach for finding work on an international level. I will be putting these links as well into the chat for anyone to use.
Thank you so much to our speakers for sharing their insights. I found them very useful as a student. Because I'm also a student, I think I'm taking notes of some resources that have been shared, and also I'm starting to think about my own experience and how I can prepare my career either in the US or outside the country. And I think it's time for you to post your questions. Please feel free to put in the questions in the Q&A section. But I also have some questions that have been asked by some students who cannot attend today's section, and this recording will be shared with them. So I think some students will start to wonder when they first have this thought, what should be their first concrete step that they can take in college to start preparing for a global career opportunities? I think, Dr. Whitehead.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak in terms of what you can do in your both curricular and co-curricular experiences. So one I think is you can look for courses or engagement in a global context. So you can look at, are there courses that you're taking where you could add a global dimension or a global dimension is part of it. So if you are taking a course that, let's say, has a community-based learning component, are you able to have engagement with a global community? Are you working with an organization that works with perhaps migrants from a particular country, or people who have been in the country for many years, maybe American citizens, but their country of origin is not the United States, and that culture and those differences are there? Or are you thinking about, in your experiences, how are you able to engage with people from the rest of the world? What are the skills that you're honing? So I think you can look at the classes you're taking and try to have as much engagement or opportunity where you have experience engaging with people from across the globe, so that you're developing those competencies that Shawn talked about, and then you can apply them. But I'm sure Nan will have some practical examples for if you're actually, where do you even start the search? But in terms of the preparation culturally and educationally, that's where I would go, is looking at your courses and having those opportunities.
I would absolutely, I'm in complete agreement with Dr. Whitehead. That I think something would be very helpful for students who are looking to enter into a global context is definitely taking a look at the language courses, classes, learning, because we're very fortunate in Bloomington that we do have a very large population whose first language is not English. Vital, which is a nonprofit organization that does function in the Monroe County Public Library, always looking for volunteers to assist in helping people adopt language. This gives you direct interface with people from a different culture from your own. I'm also a big advocate as well for students seeking out refugee support. Indiana, again, we are a very large spot for Burmese refugees, Burmese Myanmar refugees here in Indiana. Connecting yourself with nonprofits that work with refugee programs. They're always looking for volunteers. They're always eager to learn. They want your energy, they want your passion, they want your excitement, and you can apply it in a very real context of working with people in a very different culture, as well as a different political system, different government system, and learning about the different challenges that they're facing, adapting to our culture, as well as adapting to maybe a larger scale their culture, or understanding those challenges as well.
Thank you, Dr. Whitehead. I think these building your experience on campus will be very helpful, and it's not necessary for us to go abroad and build our resume to show them that we have a broad experience, but we can do something, start with on campus and connection with people from others. Education students, is there any courses or programs on your mind that our teachers want to teach abroad who can start build their global competencies? Oh, can really? Yeah. No. We should probably let Shawn speak all the time, so yeah, in School of Education, we do have some short-term exchange programs that are 2 to 4 weeks. As something I can think of, it's Indonesia program that you can go there and teach for 4 weeks, and then you can also, I think there are some other programs at Global Gateway for Teachers. You'll teach abroad for 1 year. Yeah, and Shawn.
And I'm going to try my headset now. I apologize with the craziness in my speaker, but the Global Gateway for Teachers is an excellent resource. Dr. Laura Stokowski and her staff there do amazing work. If you are wanting an international exposure in an educational setting, teaching, whether that be teaching English or actually teaching some subject areas that you may have language fluency in, that would be a great stop to have a conversation with her or Amara, who's one of the assistant directors there now as well. And both of those colleagues I can highly recommend. If you're wanting that international educational experience, I think that they are the tops and they can get you in a lot of different national experiences across the world, and you learn things there that will change your life. And she will tell you, she does an excellent job describing it, and she is an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to international education. I can't sing her praises high enough.
Shawn, I'd just love to echo. So I actually went through the Global Gateway program, but I went through the program where I spent a semester on the Navajo Nation when I was an undergraduate. And I agree with Shawn. I can't tell you the impact, the number of students who have been so positively impacted from that experience and all around the world, like not just in a particular country. That's the beautiful thing about the Global Gateway is there are locations, Europe, Asia, the African continent, all over South America. So it is truly an amazing experience.
Thank you. I've been working in the same office with Global Gateway. I can tell that the students are really working hard to prepare for their teaching abroad. And I do know some students, they stayed in the country or they came back and started to look for jobs in the countries they've been teaching in. So I do think this program is worth exploring, and it's a very good opportunity for you to, as a first step for you to start your global career. And also, for some students who may not be able to go to a short-term exchange or a long-term teaching program, but they still wonder if they can start a career outside. So they'll be like, I really enjoyed the cultures, but I'm not sure if I'm suitable to work abroad. What advice would you give them as like to just see if an international career is right for them? What can they do? And I think it's also probably connect with a confidence thing. So how can they build the confidence when they step into a new culture or professional environment abroad? I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
I can start off on some ideas I saw with. I'm not being sponsored by LinkedIn, but I do wish to push. The information on LinkedIn is quite prolific. One of the opportunities you can do on the LinkedIn profile page is that you can see where current people not just have job titles, but you can also see where in the world they work. You can sort by area. For example, if you are looking for an educational experience as a teacher, associate teacher, working with underserved populations, you can search that title and then customize your search parameters to include a country that you feel very passionate about. Italy, Greece, the African continent, New Zealand. You can see people who are already doing that work. I strongly recommend taking a look at people's profiles, see their education background, see what degrees they have, what certifications do they have, if they've detailed what their work looks like, what does a day in the life of theirs look like? If you have more questions, send them a message, send them an email, send them a note. Ask for informational interviews. Explain, I'm interested in doing what you do. Tell me more. I want to hear what your life looks like and how I can live that life too. That can be it builds connections. It gives you more tools, it gives you more resources. If after looking at something, I'm not really interested in this certification, and it seems like everyone who's in this job has to have this, that's new information you get to have and put into your tool belt for moving forward. Okay, so I'm going to adapt my search parameters, maybe look at something a little bit different or adjacent. Jumping back again to the occupational outlook handbook, you can search similar jobs. If there is a particular job that you wanted to do but it didn't feel like the right fit, but it's close to the right fit. You can see other aligned industries that fit that quite well. So you can search different job titles that you didn't even know existed. So that would be a great start point. I would absolutely endorse LinkedIn, seeing work, seeing where
Very good idea, Nan. And I know School of Education, we have a alumni association. They also have their LinkedIn and Instagram. Probably look at their followers or the people they follow. That might be very useful.
I'll jump in as well. I agree with everything Nan said. Those are some great ideas and ways to connect. I think one other thing is sort of if you're trying to figure out, can I do this? I think one thing is to first engage locally. And so have you had an opportunity to engage with folks from different backgrounds, different communities, different countries and cultures? One of the things when I led short-term study abroad programs in Ghana is we always had connections with people in Ghana before we went to the country. So the idea wasn't the first time they engaged with a Ghanaian was in Accra when we landed, but they had opportunities to engage with the local Ghanaian community, which could be quite different than what they'll encounter in country. But to have that local experience, you can sort of say, okay, I spent a day in this particular community. This was new. What worked for me? What was a challenge? What do I need to work on if I want to do this long term? I think secondly, and I think this is one thing that has already been touched on, is participating in a short-term program because that's a great way to get an idea. I think there are also some short-term, we'll say 2 years, but some opportunities for teaching, like the JET program in Japan, where you commit to teaching for a couple of years, something like that. That's a big step, of course, to take, but one where you're not saying, okay, I'm committed to being in this country forever, but where you have a time limit for what you're going to do. I think the third thing is again spending time in places where you may be in the minority, and where you may not. And it's not even so much being in the minority, but maybe there are just people from backgrounds that are quite different from yours, and that you first take the time to observe. You don't go in trying to do or change things, but you go in and observe and sort of say, okay, what am I seeing that's similar, different? What are the norms for engagement? I think, how are people greeting each other? How are people leaving? Taking the time to do that locally before you go and do it full time in another country. But I think taking that time to listen and learn. And then the last thing I would think about, and this was already touched on a little bit earlier, is volunteer and engaging in the communities where you may want to go, where there's local representation that was touched on earlier. But are you engaging in an activity where a project is involved? So you're not just going in and saying, oh yes, I've been around people from Mexico before, so I'm ready to go to Mexico. No, but did you actually work on a project with people? What was different about the way that they went about doing their work? Was it, are there things that were cultural? Are there things that are different because of the opportunities and ways to work in Mexico that they brought here? What might you encounter when you go to Mexico? So I think when you're actually doing a project or working with people on some sort of objective, that also helps you sort of recognize, oh, the workplace is also quite different. As we've heard, your resumes are different, but also the work environment may be different. And if you can handle it at this short term or in this local environment, that may show you that, yes, I can indeed handle it when I go to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Whitehead. I think we have one more question to ask before this webinar ends. So I want to ask something about future. So looking ahead, what kind of global skills or competencies do you think will be the most important, what the employers will look for our graduates? Maybe in a few years, what do you think the students should be prepared for?
I can answer one area that we can talk about, actually two. Digital technologies are becoming more and more pervasive across the world, regardless of where you're at. If you understand those particular technologies, particularly emerging technologies, and how to deploy those, in at least from an educational context, which is where I speak from, is very, very important. That is kind of almost like a universal language in a way that people are going to have those technologies. And if you are adept at using them, you have a competitive advantage.
To follow up on technology, but I do think adaptability for understanding how to integrate new technology into your life, how to utilize it. This isn't necessarily a hard skill, but we are in a generation that is, there's a new app, there's a new software, there's a new program about every 3 to 5 years. And having the adaptability to handle transitions well and how to use those is something that everyone can have, because that's happening everywhere. To build on industry that's growing quite a bit, that we are discussing a lot in the School of Public Health that may be transferable to the School of Ed, green energy, environmental health, um, learning how to integrate or make something more environmentally, ecologically conscientious are enormous. And that is on a global scale. It is enormous. It has quickly become one of the most highly paid professions in the United States, not including the rest of the world. Engineering, environmental scientists, environmental educators, environmental civic engineers, all of those advocates, all of those exploding field. So if there is something that you're looking for as an industry, that's a really big one. Again, tech and cybersecurity, huge industries right now that are on a global scale. Every country needs someone with an understanding in privacy, handling sensitive documentation, best practices to make sure people's privacy stays private, making sure students' information stays private. Those are huge on a global scale.
And I think the last thing I would say will connect with what's been said is as the digital technology becomes more important, there is still going to be a need for human skills, and there's still going to be a need for students to be able to add that human dimension and to question when the technology may be leading us down a pathway that doesn't seem quite right. And so I think that's where the communication, the teamwork, global fluency, inclusion, those competencies are just as important because you need to make sure that you are using the technology for good. Um, and you're making sure that you're using it in a way that's appropriate. The same comments we had about, earlier about how to communicate effectively. Is the technology being used in a way that's appropriate and effective? So I think those are the skills that I think will be just as important as that as students are gaining, as you're gaining these digital skills, are you also gaining the human skills that you need to accompany them?
Well, thank you all so much for your input. Thanks to our amazing speakers, Dr. Whitehead, Shawn, and Nan, for sharing your time and expertise today. We hope this session has given you some practical strategies and broader perspectives for preparing for your global career. As a reminder, today's webinar has been recorded and the recording will be posted on the Global International Engagement YouTube channel and webpage. I'm posting the link here in the chat box. Please feel free to revisit it and share it with others who may benefit from this webinar. We appreciate your participation and we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.